Well, well. Look who's wandered into the wrong room.
She scrutinized him from head to toe as if he were a stain on her stage.
Listen, son, this is advanced math, not a basic exam with your tiny brain. Do you think you can even spell it? I'll tell you. Solve this problem, and the scholarship is yours. But honestly, some people are not born to do this. And I think we all know that's you.
His eyes stood still. He took a breath. His voice was low, almost...
Could I have a piece of chalk, please?
She laughed. The whole room laughed, too. 40 seconds later, no one laughed anymore. Especially her. Let me take you back. 6 months before that moment on stage. Whitmore Academy sits on Chicago's north side like a castle that forgot to lower its drawbridge. Marble hallways, trophy cases stretching wall to wall, Latin motto carved above the entrance. The kind of school built to remind you who belongs and who doesn't. 68% of the students are white, 11 black students in the entire senior class. Isaiah Turner was one of them. He transferred in 2 years ago from Englewood. If you know Chicago, you know what that means. If you don't, picture a neighborhood where the public library closes at 4 and gunshots replace the evening news. Isaiah didn't come from money. He came from survival. His mother, Ruth Turner, worked double night shifts as a nurse at Stroger Hospital, the kind of shifts that turn your hair gray by 40. She raised Isaiah alone. No tutors, no prep courses, no safety net. Just a kitchen table, a dim lamp, and a water-damaged calculus textbook he found at Goodwill for $2. He taught himself. Every night after his mother left for work, he sat at that table and solved problems until his eyes burned. When the pages were too warped to read, he watched YouTube on a phone with a cracked screen. He didn't own a graphing calculator. He did everything by hand, every single equation, every single night. And he was extraordinary. Not the kind of extraordinary that teachers notice and nurture. The quiet kind. The kind that learns early to hide in the back row because being too visible makes you a target. Now let me tell you about Diane Preston, PhD in applied mathematics from Northwestern. She built Whitmore's math program from the ground up. 9 students sent to MIT in the last decade. Teacher of the Decade Award framed on her office wall. When she walked those marble hallways, people moved aside. Not out of respect, out of habit. She never used slurs. She didn't need to. She was the kind of person who believed, truly believed, she wasn't racist at all. But her seating chart told a different story. Every year, same pattern. Black and brown students in the last 2 rows. She called it keeping serious learners focused. Nobody challenged it. Nobody ever does when the person in charge has a PhD and a trophy case. When Isaiah first arrived at Whitmore, she looked at his transfer file, saw the Englewood zip code, and placed him in remedial math. He tested out within a week. She moved him to standard. He tested out again. She moved him to honors. He aced every assignment, so she put him in her AP calculus class, and that's when it got personal. Because in her classroom, Isaiah wasn't invisible anymore. He was a contradiction, a walking challenge to every assumption she'd built her career on. And Diane Preston did not like being challenged. She graded his tests harder than anyone else's, marked correct answers wrong, docked points for non-standard notation that she never penalized in white students. When he raised his hand, she looked right past him. When he turned in flawless homework, she returned it late with vague red ink. Needs improvement. No explanation of what or why. Isaiah never complained. Not once. He just kept solving. Now here's what matters most. Every year, Whitmore held the Preston Math Challenge. Yes, named after her. 3 rounds performed live on stage in front of the entire school. Local news cameras rolling. A giant scoreboard updating in real time. And the prize? A full-ride scholarship to any university of the winner's choice, funded by the Whitmore Alumni Foundation. For most students, this was a competition. For Isaiah Turner, it was the only door that led anywhere. His mother couldn't afford a single application fee, let alone tuition. This scholarship was college. Without it, there was nothing. He signed up 3 weeks before the event. When Diane saw his name on the list, she laughed. Not quietly, not privately. In the faculty lounge in front of 6 other teachers. One of them later said she called it adorable. But there was someone else arriving at Whitmore that week. Someone Diane hadn't planned for. Professor Harold Bennett from Howard University had been invited as this year's guest judge. A quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation built over decades. 15 years ago, he published a paper that disproved a theorem Diane had cited in her own dissertation. When they shook hands at the reception, Diane smiled wide. Bennett did not. But nobody was paying attention to the judges. Not yet. Because what nobody at Whitmore knew, not the students, not the teachers, not even Diane Preston herself, was where Isaiah had been spending his Saturday mornings for the past 6 months. And that secret was about to change everything. Morning of the competition. Isaiah arrived early, wearing a shirt his mother had ironed at 5 a.m. before collapsing into bed after her shift. He'd barely slept either, but his eyes were clear. His hands were steady. The auditorium was already filling up. 300 seats. Students, teachers, parents, a local news crew setting up a camera in the back row. A giant digital timer mounted above the stage. 2 long tables with individual desks, each one mic'd for the judges. A banner hung across the back wall. Preston Math Challenge, Excellence Through Merit. Isaiah walked to the sign-up board to check his bracket placement. He scanned the names once, then again, then a third time. His name had been moved. Every other competitor, Garrett Moore, Elaine Crawford, Spencer Wells, and 5 others, was listed in the main draw. Automatic entry, no conditions. But at the bottom of the board, separated by a thick red line, 2 names sat under a new heading. Preliminary Qualifying Round. Isaiah Turner, Alejandro Davis. The only black student, the only Latino student, separated from the rest. Isaiah stared at the board. A qualifying round had never existed in 12 years of this competition. He knew because he'd studied every past result posted on the school website. Every bracket, every rule. This was new. This was invented. At exactly 8:30, Diane Preston walked to the stage microphone. She wore a black blazer and a smile that looked rehearsed. Good morning, Whitmore. Before we begin, a small administrative update. To ensure the competition reflects genuine academic readiness, we've added a preliminary qualifying round this year. It's simply a warm-up, a chance for certain students to demonstrate they're prepared for this level of rigor. She paused. Her eyes found Isaiah in the 3rd row. I'm sure no one will have a problem with that. The auditorium murmured. A few teachers exchanged glances but said nothing. Professor Bennett, seated at the judges' table, wrote something in a small leather notebook without looking up. Backstage, Corey Adams grabbed Isaiah's arm. Bro, this is a setup. You see what she did? You and Alejandro? The only 2? Walk away. Don't give her the show. Isaiah looked past him, past the curtain, at the stage, at the scholarship banner, at his mother sitting in the 4th row in her worn Sunday coat. Ruth had traded shifts to be here. She'd lose a full day's pay. She was already sitting with her hands folded in her lap, chin up, like she was daring the world to disappoint her son. Isaiah turned back to Corey. If I walk away, she wins without trying. I'd rather lose on that stage than quit back here. He stepped out, walked to the qualifying round table, sat down. Alejandro Davis was already there, looking nervous, tapping his pencil against the desk. Isaiah gave him a small nod, the kind that says, "We're not alone." Diane watched from the side of the stage, still smiling. The qualifying problem appeared on the big screen. A ripple went through the audience. Even from the back rows, people could tell something was off. This wasn't a high school problem. It wasn't even a college problem. It was a graduate-level optimization question, the kind you'd find on a doctoral qualifying exam. Garrett Moore, watching from the front row, frowned. He recognized the difficulty. So did Elaine Crawford. So did every math teacher in the room. Professor Bennett leaned forward in his chair. He studied the problem on screen for 3 seconds. Then he turned and looked directly at Diane Preston. She didn't look back. The timer started. 90 seconds. The screen glowed red. And Isaiah Turner picked up his pencil. But what he did next wasn't what anyone in that auditorium expected. Not the students, not the judges, and definitely not Diane Preston. Isaiah didn't move right away. He sat there, pencil in hand, eyes locked on the screen. Not frozen, processing. His gaze swept left to right, line by line, the way a pianist reads a score before touching a single key. The audience shifted in their seats. Alejandro Davis was already scribbling. The timer ticked. 80 seconds. 75. Then Isaiah did something nobody expected. He stood up, walked to the whiteboard next to the screen, picked up the chalk, and instead of solving the problem, he circled one single term in the middle of the equation. He turned to face the judges' table. Before I solve this, there's an error in the problem. The auditorium went dead silent. Not quiet, dead. Diane Preston's chin lifted. Her eyes narrowed into something sharp. Excuse me? The third constraint, Isaiah said. He pointed at the circled term with the chalk. His voice was calm, unhurried, like he was explaining directions to a lost stranger. It uses a strict inequality, less than, but it should be less than or equal to. He let that sit for 1 second. With the strict inequality, the feasible region is what mathematicians call an open set. That means the maximum value you're looking for doesn't actually exist inside the domain. You'd be chasing a number you can never reach, like running toward a finish line that moves every time you get close. He tapped the board once. The problem as written has no solution. Silence. 300 people. Not a cough. Not a whisper. A math teacher in the 4th row, Mr. Donovan, 22 years in the department, leaned over to the colleague next to him. He's right. The whisper carried. Heads turned. Students pulled out phones. Professor Bennett sat perfectly still, but his pen moved across his notebook. Writing. Noting. Diane stood up from her chair at the side of the stage. That's a very creative observation, Turner. But finding typos isn't mathematics. Anyone can nitpick. Isaiah didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply turned back to the board. I'll solve the corrected version now, if that's allowed. He didn't wait for permission. He rewrote the constraint with the correct inequality. Then, in clean handwriting that filled the board in organized rows, he solved the entire optimization problem, step by step. Each line flowing from the last like water finding its level. He set up the objective function, identified the critical points by setting the derivative to 0, checked each point against the corrected constraints to confirm they fell inside the valid region, then compared the values to find the true maximum, 41 seconds. He set the chalk down, stepped back, and returned to his seat. The timer still had 38 seconds left. Alejandro Davis stared at him from the next desk. His pencil had stopped moving 2 minutes ago. Not because he'd given up, because he'd been watching. Professor Bennett spoke first from the judges' table. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd spent 40 years in lecture halls. The correction is valid. The solution is correct. Mr. Turner passes the qualifying round with full marks. Then he added something that wasn't required. Something that landed like a stone dropped into still water. For the record, this problem was sourced from a published graduate textbook. It has appeared in at least 3 prior competitions. The error Mr. Turner identified has existed in every version. No one has caught it before. In 12 years of this competition, no one. He looked at Diane when he said that last part. She didn't look back. The auditorium buzzed. Not the polite buzz of impressed adults, the electric buzz of students who just watched something they'd never seen before. A kid from the back row correcting the test itself. Diane recovered fast. She always did. She straightened her blazer, adjusted the microphone. Well, interesting start. Let's hope Mr. Turner's actual competition performance matches his proofreading skills. A few nervous laughs, but fewer than before. The room was shifting. People were watching Isaiah differently now. Alejandro Davis also passed the qualifying round. Isaiah had helped him, not with the full solution, but with a single whispered word during the setup. Boundaries. It was enough. Alejandro found the right approach on his own. Now let me tell you something that nobody in that auditorium knew yet. Something that explains how a kid from Inglewood, with no tutor and no calculator, could see what PhD holders missed. 6 months earlier, Isaiah had found a flyer pinned to a corkboard at the Inglewood Public Library. Faded yellow paper, half covered by a notice about free flu shots. It read, "Free Saturday problem-solving sessions, hosted by Howard University Mathematics Extension Program." Every Saturday since then, Isaiah had taken a 2-hour bus ride across the city. Each way, 4 hours round trip. He sat in a room at a community college campus with 8 other students and 2 graduate teaching assistants who worked under one of the most respected mathematicians in the country, Professor Harold Bennett. Isaiah didn't know Bennett would be judging today. Bennett didn't know Isaiah would be competing. But the mathematics that connected them was already in the room. It had been in the room the moment Isaiah picked up that chalk. Diane Preston had just watched a student she called a charity case dismantle her competition's own problem on live stage. In front of cameras, in front of parents, in front of the man whose research had once embarrassed her own. And the real competition hadn't even started yet. So what happens when a woman who's never been wrong meets a kid who can't afford to lose? Round 1 was about to answer that question. The main competition began at 10 a.m. sharp. 8 students walked onto the stage. Individual desks arranged in a curved line facing the audience. Each desk had a whiteboard, a marker, and nothing else. The giant timer glowed above them in red digits. The live scoreboard, 8 names, 8 columns, filled the screen behind the stage. Isaiah's name sat at the bottom of the board. Last alphabetically, last in seating. The desk farthest from center stage, closest to the exit door. Whether that was intentional or not, it sent a message. Garrett Moore sat dead center. Varsity jacket. Expensive watch. The kind of calm that comes from knowing the system was built for you. He'd won this competition 2 years straight. He had private tutors, a $200 graphing calculator at home, and 3 weeks of personal coaching from Diane Preston herself. Next to him, Elaine Crawford, quiet, precise, headed to Caltech in the fall. And Spencer Wells, lanky kid who'd placed nationally in math counts back in 8th grade. These were not weak opponents. These were the best Whitmore had. Diane stepped to the microphone. She scanned the stage the way a general inspects troops. Her eyes passed over Isaiah without stopping, like he was furniture. Before round 1 begins, a small rule adjustment. To keep the focus on pure mathematical thinking, there will be no scratch paper in this round. Mental math only. A murmur swept through the audience. Professor Bennett shifted in his seat. "Mrs. Preston, this wasn't in the format we discussed." Diane smiled. The kind of smile that dares you to push back in public. "It's been my competition for 12 years, Harold. I think I know what tests real ability." She emphasized real just enough. Bennett held her gaze for a long moment. Then he leaned back, said nothing, but his pen moved in that notebook again. No scratch paper. For a speed round. In advanced mathematics. Isaiah looked down at his empty desk. No paper, no calculator, no safety net. Just his mind. Round 1. Speed solve. 5 problems flashing on screen in rapid succession. Students write answers on individual whiteboards. Fastest correct answer gets full points. Problem 1. Algebra. Straightforward. All 8 boards went up within seconds. All correct. Problem 2. Trigonometric identity. 7 boards up. 1 mistake from the student on the far left. Eliminated immediately. 7 remained. Problem 3. Combinatorics. This is where it happened. The problem asked for the number of ways to arrange a set of objects with specific restrictions. The kind of problem that normally requires careful casework, listing possibilities, crossing out duplicates, counting what's left. Without scratch paper, most students would need 2 or 3 minutes of pure mental tracking. Isaiah's board went up in 11 seconds. 11 seconds. Garrett was still reading the second line. Elaine had her eyes closed, counting in her head. Spencer was mouthing numbers silently. Isaiah had seen something none of them saw. The structure of the problem was symmetric. If you recognized the symmetry, you didn't need to count every case. You could count half and multiply by 2. What took others 200 steps took him 2. His answer was correct. The audience reacted before the judges confirmed it. A gasp that started in the front row and rolled backward like a wave. Students grabbed each other's arms. A teacher stood up halfway and sat back down. The local news camera swung toward Isaiah. A reporter whispered into her microphone. "The transfer student from Englewood is leading the competition." In the fourth row, Ruth Turner's hands tightened around her purse strap until her knuckles paled. Problems 4 and 5 came and went. Isaiah answered both correctly. So did Garrett. So did Elaine. But the damage was done. The scoreboard updated. Isaiah Turner, 5 out of 5, first place. Garrett Moore, 4 out of 5, second place. Elaine Crawford, 4 out of 5, third place. Spencer Wells, 3 out of 5, eliminated. The boy with no calculator, no tutor, and no scratch paper was leading the Preston Math Challenge, on Diane Preston's own stage. During the break, 3 things happened that the audience didn't see. Diane pulled out her phone backstage and started texting furiously. Who was she messaging? Garrett Moore walked up to Diane in the hallway. They spoke in low voices. What did he need from her? And Professor Bennett opened a manila folder, pulled out his laptop, and began comparing this year's problems against a database. What was he looking for? But round 1 was just the warm-up. Round 2 was where this competition always got ugly. And this year, someone had made sure it would be uglier than ever. 15-minute break before round 2. The clock on the auditorium screen counted down in red, every second visible, every second loud. This is where the story speeds up. Isaiah stepped into the hallway for air. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Just for a second. Just to breathe. Yo, Isaiah! Alejandro Davis came jogging around the corner, phone in hand, grinning so wide it barely fit his face. Bro, you're blowing up. The whole Southside group chat is watching the live stream. My cousin in Englewood just texted me. He said the barbershop on 63rd has it playing on the TV. Isaiah blinked. The barbershop? Dead serious. Everybody's watching. You got people in your corner you don't even know about. For the first time all day, Isaiah smiled. A real one. Not performance. Not defense. The kind of smile that comes when you realize you're not as alone as you thought. That was the first win. Then his phone buzzed. A text from his mother's coworker at Stroger, a woman named Gloria who'd known Ruth for 15 years. Your mama's blood pressure spiked. She's staying in her seat, stubborn as always. Don't tell her I told you. Just know. Isaiah stared at the screen. His hand trembled once. He locked the phone, slid it into his pocket, pressed his palm flat against the wall until the shaking stopped. She came here for him, traded a full shift, lost a day's pay, and now her body was paying the price of watching her son fight a war she couldn't fight for him. That was the first loss. He headed back toward the stage. In the hallway near the water fountain, Spencer Wells was waiting. Spencer, who'd just been eliminated in round 1. Tall, awkward, hands shoved in his pockets. Hey, Turner. Isaiah stopped. I've done 5 of these competitions. Regional, state, 2 nationals. I know what elite looks like. Spencer paused, swallowed once. You're the best one up there, and it's not close. No handshake, no big moment. Just one competitor telling another the truth. Isaiah nodded. Thanks, man. Spencer walked away. That quiet respect between people who speak the same language, numbers, even when the world tries to rank them differently. That was the second win. Isaiah returned to the stage. The round 2 problem sets had been printed and placed face down on each desk. He sat down, waited for the signal. Then he noticed something. Garrett Moore's packet was thicker. Not by much, but enough. An extra stapled page at the back. Isaiah checked his own packet. Thinner. The additional page was missing. He raised his hand. Diane walked over. Slow. The way someone walks when they want you to know they're in no rush for you. Mrs. Preston, my packet seems to be missing a page. Garrett's has an extra sheet stapled to the back. Diane glanced at his packet, then at Garrett's. Her expression didn't change. That's supplemental reference material, Turner. It's optional. A formula sheet. Not everyone needs one. She paused, let her eyes settle on him. Some students memorize their formulas. I assumed you had, given your confidence earlier. She turned and walked away before he could respond. The audience saw the exchange. The microphones picked up enough. Parents shifted in their seats. A teacher in the second row whispered to another, "Did she really just—" Professor Bennett's pen stopped moving. He looked at Isaiah, then at Diane. Then he wrote one long sentence in his notebook and underlined it twice. That was the second loss. The timer hit 0. Round 2 began. The strategic problem. Multi-step optimization. Much harder than round 1. The kind of problem with a hidden trap. One path that looks clean, elegant, almost too perfect, and another path that's ugly, grinding, full of messy algebra. The elegant path leads to a wrong answer. The ugly path leads to the right one. Isaiah read the problem twice. Then he did something that separated him from everyone else on that stage. He checked the boundaries. He plugged extreme values into the elegant answer. Largest possible. Smallest possible. And there it was. The elegant solution produced a negative number for a quantity that had to be positive. Like a map that looks right until you realize it sends you off a cliff. The elegant answer was a trap. Isaiah took the ugly path, ground through the algebra, line after line of careful, unglamorous work. No shortcuts this time, just discipline. Across the stage, Garrett Moore wrote the elegant answer, smiled, put his pen down, leaned back with the satisfaction of a man who thinks he's already won. The timer ran out. Boards up. The judges reviewed. Professor Bennett examined both solutions in silence. Mr. Moore's answer is incorrect. The solution violates the positivity constraint at the boundary. Garrett's face drained white. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Mr. Turner's answer is correct. The auditorium erupted. Not applause, something raw. The sound of 300 people realizing they were witnessing something that doesn't happen at Whitmore Academy. Diane stood immediately. I'd like to review Mr. Turner's notation. His formatting doesn't follow the competition's official style guide. Section 4, paragraph 2. All work must conform to standard mathematical presentation. Professor Bennett didn't blink. I've reviewed his work. The mathematics is correct. The notation is unambiguous. The answer stands, Mrs. Preston. I'm simply ensuring fairness. The answer stands. 4 syllables. Final. Diane's mouth closed like a door. That was the third win. And the third loss. Because every win Isaiah earned came with a reminder that the ground beneath him was never stable. The scoreboard updated. Isaiah Turner, first place. Garrett Moore, second place. Everyone else, eliminated. The final 2. The auditorium buzzed like a hive. Students recorded on phones. The hashtag Preston Challenge started trending locally. A group text among teachers circled one question. Is this really happening? But Isaiah wasn't celebrating, because during the second break, he walked past the faculty lounge. The door was cracked, and he heard Diane Preston's voice inside. Low, urgent, talking on the phone. I don't care what was planned. Switch the final round problem. Use the alternate. Yes, the one from the doctoral qualifying bank. That kid got lucky twice. He won't get lucky a third time. Isaiah stopped walking. His sneakers made no sound on the marble floor. He stood there for 3 seconds, heard every word. Then, he kept walking. The final round was in 10 minutes. The problem had just been changed. Changed specifically because a black kid from Inglewood was winning a competition that was never meant for him. And Isaiah Turner had no one in his corner but his own mind. So what do you do when the person writing the test is also the person who wants you to fail? You walk onto that stage anyway. The auditorium settled. The final round was moments away. Isaiah and Garrett sat at their desks on stage, facing 300 people and a countdown clock that hadn't started yet. Diane walked to the microphone to introduce the final problem. She opened her mouth. Professor Bennett stood up first. The movement was small, just a man rising from a chair, but the way he did it, slow, deliberate, like a judge entering a courtroom, made the entire room turn. Before we proceed, I need to put something on the record. Diane's hand froze on the microphone. Bennett stepped forward. He held the manila folder he'd been writing in all day. He opened it. His voice carried the weight of a man who had spent 40 years choosing his words carefully and never wasting one. Over the course of today's competition, I've been cross-referencing the problems used in each round against published databases of previous math competitions nationwide. He paused. The room held its breath. 3 of the 5 problems in round 1 were taken from competitions held in the last 2 years, competitions in which one of today's finalists previously participated. He didn't say Garrett's name. He didn't need to. Every head in the auditorium turned toward the boy in the varsity jacket. Garrett's jaw tightened. His eyes shot to Diane. She didn't look at him. Bennett continued. I'm not making accusations. I'm ensuring transparency. Therefore, for the final round, I'm exercising my authority as guest judge to select the problem myself. From a source neither competitor has encountered, a problem that is genuinely new to both. He turned to Diane. Is that acceptable, Mrs. Preston? 300 people watched her face cycle through something complicated. Anger, calculation, the slow realization that refusing would confirm every suspicion already forming in the room. She smiled. It cost her everything. Of course, Professor. Transparency is what we've always valued here. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. Beneath the podium, her fingers pressed against the wood so hard her knuckles whitened. The game had just changed. Diane could no longer control the difficulty. She couldn't rig the question. She couldn't tilt the floor. For the first time in 12 years, her competition was no longer hers. But this wasn't just a problem for Diane. It was a problem for Isaiah, too. A genuinely unknown question from a Howard University professor meant no preparation, no pattern recognition, no safety net. Pure thinking in real time. Corey Adams caught Isaiah's eye from the wings. Mouthed, "You good?" Isaiah nodded once. "Good. I'd rather earn it." But what Bennett chose for that final round would go on to become the most talked about moment in Whitmore Academy's history. Not because of how hard it was, but because of what happened when Isaiah Turner read it. 2 desks, 2 whiteboards, 1 problem, 5 minutes. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Students lined the walls. Teachers filled every aisle. The news camera held steady in the back row, its red light unblinking. 300 people leaned forward in their seats like the room itself was holding its breath. Professor Bennett placed a single sheet under the document camera. The problem filled the screen. Proof by mathematical induction. Prove that a specific inequality holds for every positive integer. The base case was clean. The setup was elegant. But the inductive step, proving that if the pattern works for one number, it must work for the next, demanded something deeper. A leap that no formula could hand you. You either saw it or you didn't. 5 minutes. Begin. The timer started. Red digits. Counting backward. Isaiah moved fast. Base case on the board in 12 seconds. Crisp. Correct. He wrote the inductive hypothesis without hesitation. Assume the inequality holds for integer k. Now prove it holds for k plus 1. His chalk hit the board with quiet, rhythmic precision. Substitution, factor, simplify, each step flowing into the next. Then, on line 4, his hand wrote a plus where it should have written a minus. One sign, one small, silent mistake. He didn't catch it. Neither did the audience. But math doesn't forgive what the eye misses. That wrong sign bled into every line beneath it, twisting the logic, poisoning the proof, turning correct work into a house built on sand. Isaiah kept writing, confident, focused, certain he was right. Across the stage, Garrett Moore worked at a different pace, slower, cautious. He'd completed the base case and was grinding toward the inductive step one careful line at a time. Behind, but clean. Diane Preston watched from the side of the stage. Her gaze tracked Isaiah's board, line by line. When her eyes reached line 4, something changed in her face. She smiled. She'd spotted the error before he did. Isaiah wrote his final line, the concluding statement. He stepped back, tilted his head, and read from the top. His expression cracked, not dramatically, not for the cameras, just a quiet fracture behind the eyes. The moment you realize the bridge you just crossed is missing a beam. The sign error on line 4 had pulled every conclusion off course. The proof collapsed. Timer, 2 minutes, 15 seconds. Isaiah's chalk dropped to his side. His shoulders sank 1 inch. Ruth Turner pressed her hand over her mouth. Corey Adams locked both fists around his armrest. Alejandro Davis forgot to breathe. Diane leaned toward the teacher next to her and whispered something behind her palm. The teacher looked away. Whatever it wasn't sympathy. 3 seconds passed. Isaiah stood motionless. The timer bled downward. 2 minutes. 1:55. 1:50. Then he looked up. Past the stage lights, past the scoreboard, into the audience. He found his mother. Ruth wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She sat in her worn Sunday coat with her back straight and her hands folded, and she looked at him the same way she had looked at him every single day of his life. Not like a mother watching her son lose. Like a woman who already knew her son's worth and understood that no competition on earth could measure it. Isaiah breathed once, turned back to the board. He drew a firm horizontal line beneath the broken work. Above it, in steady letters, one word: correction. No time to rewrite, no room on the board. The repair had to happen inside his head. He broke the flawed expression into 3 smaller pieces, reduced each one mentally, recombined them. His lips moved in silence, numbers flowing through him like a current only he could feel. He opened his eyes, lifted the chalk, wrote 4 new lines beneath the correction mark, each one precise, each one irreversible. The timer read 38 seconds. Ruth's hands unfolded slowly. Corey exhaled. Diane's smile wavered at the edges like a candle in a draft. 38 seconds to save 2 years of work, a lifetime of proving himself, and the only future he could afford. What Isaiah did with those 38 seconds is the reason this story exists. 38 seconds. Isaiah's chalk touched the board and didn't stop. The corrected substitution changed everything. Not just the sign, the entire shape of the proof shifted beneath his hand. Under pressure, with the clock bleeding red and 300 people watching, his mind did what it had always done in the quiet of his mother's kitchen at midnight. It simplified. Instead of wrestling the full inequality head-on, Isaiah stepped back. He introduced a bounding expression, a simpler function that sat between both sides of the inequality like a bridge connecting 2 cliffs. If he could prove that both sides related to this middle expression in the right way, the original inequality had to be true. Always. For every positive integer. It was the mathematical equivalent of someone lost in a maze, climbing above it and pointing to the exit from the sky. Line 1. Establish the bound. Line 2. Show the left side is always less than or equal to the bound. Line 3. Show the bound is always less than or equal to the right side. Line 4. Therefore, left is always less than or equal to right. Done. He set the chalk down, stepped back. The timer read 4 seconds. 4 seconds. And the proof on the board was not just correct, it was beautiful. The kind of solution that doesn't just answer a question, but makes you wonder why anyone would solve it any other way. The auditorium was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from earlier in the day. A different kind. The silence of people who just watched something they don't fully understand, but can feel in their bones. Professor Bennett rose from the judges' table. He walked to Garrett's board first. Garrett's work was organized, neat handwriting, logical structure. He had the base case. He had the inductive hypothesis. He had the beginning of the inductive step. But that's where it ended. The proof trailed off mid-line, like a sentence that runs out of words. He'd hit the wall, the non-obvious leap, and couldn't get past it. Bennett studied it for 10 seconds, nodded once. Then he walked to Isaiah's board. He stood in front of it for a long time. His fingers traced the lines without touching the surface, hovering just above the chalk marks the way a person reads Braille through glass. He paused at the correction mark, the horizontal line where Isaiah's proof broke and was reborn. He turned to face the auditorium. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word reached the back wall. Mr. Moore's work demonstrates solid competence. It is organized and partially correct. However, the inductive step is not closed. The proof does not stand. Garrett's head dropped. Not in shame, in understanding. He knew. Bennett turned back to Isaiah's board. Mr. Turner's work contains a corrected error. He paused. Let those words sit in the room. I want to be very clear about something. Self-correction under pressure is not a weakness. It is the single most important quality a mathematician can possess. Any student can solve a problem they've rehearsed. Finding your own mistake, under a live clock, in front of an audience and repairing it with a superior method, that is the hallmark of a mind that audits its own logic in real time. He traced the bounding technique with his finger. The approach used here is not standard for this academic level. This is the method I would expect from a second-year graduate student, perhaps a strong one. He faced the audience fully. The proof is complete, it is elegant, and it is correct. Then Bennett delivered the line that would be replayed 10,000 times before the week was over. I would also like to note that Mr. Turner was the only participant today. In fact, the only person in 12 years of this competition to identify an error in the competition's own materials. A competition designed, vetted, and administered by its creator. He did not look at Diane. He didn't need to. Every head in the auditorium turned toward her anyway. Her smile was gone. Not fading, gone. Replaced by something rigid and pale, like a mask that no longer fits the face beneath it. Bennett returned to the microphone. The winner of this year's competition and the recipient of the Whitmore Alumni Foundation Full Ride Scholarship is Isaiah Turner. The room broke open. Not polite applause. Not the restrained clapping of an academic ceremony. A detonation. Students were on their feet before the sentence ended. Corey Adams screamed so loud his voice cracked. Alejandro Davis punched the air with both fists. Spencer Wells, standing against the wall, nodded slowly and clapped with his hands above his head. Ruth Turner covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook. The woman who hadn't cried through double shifts, through single motherhood, through a life that never once gave her a break. She cried now. Not from sadness, from the unbearable relief of watching the world finally see what she had always seen. Phones were in the air. The live stream chat exploded. The local news reporter was speaking rapidly into her microphone, but no one could hear her over the noise. Isaiah stood at the whiteboard, chalk dust on his fingers, still as stone. The boy from Englewood, who taught himself calculus from a $2 book, was standing under a spotlight on a stage named after the woman who told him to look at trade schools. And now came the part no one expected. By competition protocol, The department chair presents the scholarship certificate on stage. Diane Preston had to walk up there. She had to hand it to him, in front of everyone. She stood, straightened her blazer one final time, walked to the podium. Each step measured, controlled, precise. The walk of someone holding themselves together by willpower alone. She picked up the certificate, held it with both hands, turned to Isaiah. The auditorium went quiet. 300 people watching a woman who had spent 12 years on top of this stage face the student she had spent 2 years trying to keep off it. She extended the certificate. "You earned this." 3 words. No warmth. No apology. No congratulations. But no denial either. It was the most honest sentence Diane Preston had spoken all year. Isaiah took the certificate, looked at her, and in a voice so calm it could have stopped a hurricane, he said, "I know." Not with arrogance, not with revenge, with the quiet, unshakable weight of a person who had always known his own worth, and had simply been waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. The auditorium erupted again, louder this time, because everyone understood what those 2 words really meant. They meant, "I didn't need your permission. I never did." But the story didn't end when Isaiah took that certificate. As the auditorium emptied and the noise faded into hallway chatter and car engines in the parking lot, Professor Bennett walked quietly toward the administrative wing. He carried the manila folder he'd been writing in all day. Every page filled, every observation time-stamped. He knocked on Principal Laura Sullivan's door. What he showed her took 11 minutes to explain and less than 30 seconds to understand. Bennett had spent the past 3 weeks, not just today, analyzing the Preston Math Challenge. Every bracket, every qualifying round, every problem set, 5 years of data. The pattern was undeniable. In every single year, students of color had been separated into preliminary qualifying rounds. White students advanced automatically. The qualifying problems were, on average, 2 full difficulty levels above the main competition, pulled from graduate-level sources that no high school student should face. And in every case, the qualifying round was designed, selected, and administered by one person, Diane Preston. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an oversight. It was architecture. Built quietly, maintained carefully, hidden behind words like readiness and rigor and fairness. Principal Sullivan closed the folder, sat in silence for a long moment, then picked up her phone. By the end of the week, 2 things happened. First, the Preston Math Challenge was renamed, permanently. It became the Whitmore Mathematics Scholarship Competition. Diane's name came off the plaque. Her portrait came off the wall. 12 years of legacy, dismantled in a single vote. Second, Diane Preston was placed on administrative review. She wasn't fired. This story doesn't give you that easy satisfaction. But she was required to complete mandatory bias training, removed from all competition oversight, and would never again serve as sole proctor for any academic event. Her authority wasn't destroyed, it was checked. And then there was one more thing. Isaiah's D+ test, the one Diane had held between 2 fingers like it smelled, the one she dropped on his desk in front of 31 students, was submitted for independent regrading. 3 answers marked wrong were correct. His actual score was an A-. Remember the opening? Remember how Isaiah smiled when she humiliated him? Now you know why. He already knew the grade was wrong. He always knew. He was just waiting for the right stage to prove it. 1 month later, Isaiah Turner sat at his mother's kitchen table, the same dim lamp, and opened 4 acceptance letters. Princeton, University of Chicago, MIT, and Howard University. He chose Howard. When people asked why, he said, "Because someone there believed in me before I ever stepped on that stage." Whitmore held a small ceremony in the same auditorium, same stage, same lights, different feeling. Principal Sullivan invited Isaiah to say a few words. He kept it short. "I'm not standing here because I'm special. I'm standing here because I didn't let someone else decide what I'm worth. That's not a math skill, that's a life skill, and it's free." He stepped back from the microphone. The room stood and clapped. Not the explosion from competition day, something warmer. The sound of people who finally understood what they'd been looking at all along. In the fourth row, Ruth Turner clapped with her hands close to her chest. She didn't stand. Her blood pressure medication was working. She didn't need to stand. Her son was standing for both of them. After the ceremony, Garrett Moore found Isaiah in the hallway. They stood face to face for a quiet moment. Two young men on opposite sides of a system neither of them built. "That bounding technique in the final round," Garrett said. "Can you show me how you did that?" Isaiah looked at him. No grudge. No score to settle. "Yeah, come on." They walked into an empty classroom together. The rival wasn't the villain. He was a product of the same broken machine. And he was choosing, for the first time, to learn from someone the machine had told him to look down on. The narrator's voice returns one last time, quiet and steady. Isaiah Turner didn't win because the world was fair. He won because he was ready when fairness finally showed up. And sometimes, that's all any of us can ask for.